MP for North West Norfolk, also a Shadow Treasury Minister. His job there includes covering the UK tax system. James, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Good to chat.
What are your thoughts on this then? How much sympathy do you have for the farmers who are probably making their way down to London from Norfolk as we speak?
They are, and there's a flurry of what looks like a bit of snow out the window to welcome them. Look, there's a lot of concern. I've been contacted by a number of farmers who are worried about what this will mean in terms of the breakup of their farm. The return that they get is not sufficient to be able to pay the level of inheritance tax that Labour's proposals would mean. And it's really a broken promise, because before the election, Labour, the Prime Minister, repeatedly told farming unions that they wouldn't bring in these changes. And then they've just done it in the budget without any consultation and trying to work out how to do this in the most effective way. So it's little wonder there's going to be thousands of farmers here today.
There's a lot of confusion around about it, though, isn't there? We've had farmers on who are angry about it. We've had others on who've been more reassuring about it and saying that actually this won't affect as many people as perhaps farmers are feeling. So why is there such a difference in the figures from what the government are telling us compared to what farmers are telling us and what they're worried about?
Well, I think the NFU and others have pointed out that DEFRA's own figures differ from the ones that the Treasury have been using to justify this policy, which just underlines that this has been a rushed measure which hasn't been consulted on. If the government really wants to deal with evasion and avoidance of people buying up big farms simply to avoid inheritance tax, you could look at things like how long someone has owned a farm, for example, so that people who've just done it wouldn't get the relief. So there's ways that could be done. The farming sector said they're happy to engage constructively on this, but so far the government's refused to consider reversing its proposals. I think it should withdraw them. There's a lot of anger in the countryside, a lot of concern for people who are struggling to make their way in what is a tough market, and the average return for farming is about 0.5%. So it's not something that many people would be looking to invest in. And this will have the impact we've heard on the programme already, hitting food security, potentially putting up food prices. And these family farms are the custodians of the countryside. So we should be respecting the role that they play and recognise that this measure was actually put in place, this property relief, precisely to protect family farms from being broken up. So Labour's U-turning on all of those positions that have been well established. So it should rethink and not do this damaging measure for the countryside.
I'm glad you mentioned the tax loophole, as some are calling it there. Jeremy Clarkson himself in previous interviews has said that one of the reasons he bought a farm was to avoid inheritance tax. That's a loophole that could have been closed by previous governments, isn't it?
Well, I think the way that Labour have done this, I mean, I've had emails from farmers saying that this will be a hammer blow for their business, that it will destroy small family farms. If you want to go after certain groups of people, then you could pick a far higher threshold, which would make it viable for family farms to continue. Or you could look at how long has someone owned a farm. If someone's just bought one in the last couple of years, and clearly that's not a family farm that's been passed down through the generations, which is what this relief was all about. But because it's been rushed and done in a way, and the ministers have been quite arrogant in Parliament, telling farmers they don't really understand it and to look at the detail, I think they do understand the detail of their farms and how viable it is for them, although they may have what is a considerable asset, to actually generate the income to pay for a six-figure inheritance tax bill on an annual basis. The economics just doesn't stack up. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this is about the people who are growing our food and looking after our countryside.
When we spoke to Emily Norton earlier on, she was saying that one potential benefit from this is that it may encourage older farmers to actually pass on the farms to their family before they die. In the 7 years, hopefully they'll get 7 years before that. That then would bring down the average age of farmers and allow younger people perhaps to invest in farming more than they're able to do so at the moment. You can see that as a possible benefit from this, can't you?
Well, I think those people who are in the position, I've been contacted by someone who said that their father's 85 years old and owns the farm at the moment. So I'm not sure the 7-year rule would necessarily work for them. And also, I'm not a tax lawyer, so people would need to take tax advice, but it could be that there is some liability that arises, and obviously costs if you continue to run the farm, even though you've given the asset over to someone else. So we look to bring younger people into farming when the change in the way the subsidy scheme worked, for example, and there were options for people to take payouts essentially, so that they could exit the industry if they wanted to, and to bring more people in. But this measure will also hit tenant farmers as well, which is where you've got younger people coming into the sector as well. So I think that this just hasn't been thought through. It just demonstrates a lack of understanding of the countryside, and frankly, the way that ministers have responded, it indicates a lack of care about what happens in the countryside and the farming community. And that's why we're going to see a lot of people here today, because there's a lot of worry and anxiety across the farming sector. As I say, this is a sector that has to deal with the weather, doesn't always get good yields. It's a very unpredictable business to be in. It's really a way of life for people in Norfolk and more widely, and that's why I'm looking forward to talking to the farmers today who are coming down to share their views.
What do you think today will achieve?
Well, I think it will show the level of concern that there is in the rural community. Clearly not every farmer who would want to come is going to be able to come, but I think there'll be a strong show of force. And I think it's time for the government to withdraw these proposals, just pause on them, consult, talk to the sector in a proper way, and see how the aims that they say they want in terms of tackling any avoidance can be dealt with in more intelligent ways, and rather than this sort of hammer blow that farmers have talked to me about.
James Wilde, thanks for joining us this morning.